Welcome to the Healthy Careers Podcast, where we help healthcare providers succeed on purpose. We take a conversational approach in learning from others who have been there and done that. Join us as we share expert insights from real people who are just like you, because we believe that success isn't just a destination, it's an intentional journey, and you don't have to do it alone.
Welcome back to the Healthy Careers Podcast. I'm your host, Madison, and today I have a special guest, an executive director from Phoenix Senior Living, Nick. And he's going to talk to us about a few different things that are near and dear to my heart as well when it comes to leadership and building out strategic talent acquisition plans as a leader. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So I first connected with you on LinkedIn, and I know that you've got a diverse background, but would love to just kind of first and foremost hear a little bit about who you are and what you do where you're at.
Yeah, so my name is Nick Rowell. I'm the executive director for Phoenix Senior Living, currently the Phoenix in Brazelton, Georgia. It's about an hour-ish northeast of Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
Through that executive director, I do pretty much everything, kind of the CEO of a building.
Sure.
So over sales, over dining, it's like a one giant cruise ship with no water. So lots of fun. Yeah.
Awesome. And how did you get into that space? Because I worked in the space in college and it was one of the best jobs I ever had. I still share stories of people of things that to this day just warm my heart. And I love to hear how people got into that space because I don't think it's something where people just know, when they're 16, okay, this is what I want to do.
Yeah, by no means was I thinking senior living was going to be a career for sure. So I went to the Grange College, played football on there, got my accounting degree, and thought that I wanted to be an accountant. 6 weeks before graduation, I told my dad, I was like, yeah, it's not really something I want to do.
Yeah.
But my mom encouraged me to try and get something within accounting to, at least use it. I did a practice interview, believe it or not, with our CEO, and he ended up saying, like, hey, not sure we have a place for you, but we really like what's going on, and we want to bring you on. And so I worked as an accountant for like 18 months, and then got an opportunity to transition into a community, which I did not want to do. I did not want to do. I remember like seeing jobs and being like, man, a community role looks really difficult.
Yep.
And certainly being an executive director looks like it is not a lot of fun at all. And kind of in my first 6 months, I confirmed it for myself, like, yeah, this is not fun. And kind of had like an aha moment of, hey, you're really here for leadership and helping people out. Kind of a specific example that I had was I had a lady who was working like 2 jobs, supporting like 14 people in her life, and
Wow.
Basically just said, I don't know how I'm going to feed my kids tonight, but I can't do this job anymore. And I was like, ooh, that's kind of bone chilling, if you will. And I was like, yeah, I don't want that to happen again. And so that was in 2017 that happened. And so I got an opportunity to become an executive director in 2019. And that sort of stuck with me in terms of, being with our frontline associates, being with department heads or anyone else in the community, trying to, within, senior living in general, trying to keep things light, but then also, hey, how can I help you in your next steps? So,
yeah, it's definitely, like you said, I think you kind of find your way into it. And I think different life situations, a lot of people I know, they were introduced to it when they had somebody in their family that was in a similar situation or in a senior living facility or clinic, however you want to point it. And I think there's so much good that happens. I mean, it's never easy to put your loved one in that situation, and you want to know that when you do, that they're in good hands. And I think a lot of that boils down to from the top down of leadership of like what are the expectations, and when you're hiring, what are the traits and the qualities that you look for in, anything from somebody who's handling activities, as you mentioned, the executive director over all of it, somebody who's maybe taking care of activities for the patients, and then all the way up to somebody that might be, providing care clinically to somebody. And so I want to hear too, kind of how you've been able to build out strategy around what those things look like for a successful team. And then maybe some of the challenges and things that you've learned along the way, and also building that all out, because I'm sure it wasn't all rainbows and butterflies.
Yeah, no doubt. Especially, 2020 was difficult on everyone.
Yeah.
And so that's when I was a 26-year-old ED.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to figure out how to do that. So really the main thing for me was, again, 2020 was big for everyone. But during that year, I learned, a lot changes quickly in a matter of time. And there are a lot of times that people go, again, hey, this isn't worth it. And so one of the things that I really try to do with all of my people, I truly mean it, is senior living is a 24/7 gig.
Mm-hmm.
So, we work at 12 o'clock in the morning on Christmas. We work at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday. So I try to make it important to every single person that I care that they have a life outside of work.
Mm-hmm.
And that, hey, you have a kid's baseball game that you want to go to, you have a graduation that you want to be at, you've got, birthday party, funeral, whatever. You can go to that. We're bigger than one person. We can figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that has really been kind of the beginning, kind of like I think the first part. The second part of it has been whether you want to become a CNO. It's CNO week, so whether you want to become a CNO,
Happy every week.
So whether you want to become a CNA, or you want to be a nurse, or you want to be a chef, or you just want to do a part-time housekeeping and while you figure out college or whatever else,
Sure.
we're here for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what are some of the traits that you've found in hiring have done the best or been the most successful? And I don't mean successful in the means of like they've rised up and been able to make the most money, but more so just you found them to be the happiest in that role. Like, what are some of the things that you look for?
Well, first one is just being thoughtful and being caring. I think that's obviously one. But having a positive attitude on life. Within senior living, there aren't a lot of people who line up to move in. They're not like, hey, I want to move here.
Yeah.
And so being positive and letting those people kind of know, hey, we're here for you, we're glad you're here. And then just in terms of characteristics, it's, are you a good person? The judge of that is very different for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
When I do interviews, I really like talk like, hey, what's been your greatest struggle? What are things that you look forward to? What are your goals? And then kind of like ask you, like, could I have a beer with you? Right? It's like, can we sit down and break bread and like have a good, 15, 20 minutes? Yeah. And if that's that, then yeah, we can work together. We'll figure it out. I don't care if you know how to do anything that we're hiring for. You're a good person. We can figure it out.
I think that's so key, especially, pre-COVID market to post-COVID are two different things. And I think so many leaders are stuck in hiring off of a resume as if it was pre-COVID. And it's like, I've even had people be like, why is there a gap on the resume? And I want to just, see, have you been under a hole? I mean, come on now. There are people that maybe had to take time off of work to care for a loved one that was ill. There have been people who really second guessed the profession, but ultimately came back to it because they left and realized like, hey, maybe I do like my job. I just need to find a better culture and environment to actually be within. There are people who, went locums because they wanted to earn the extra money during COVID. There are people that decided to take a career break because they didn't want to handle the whole COVID thing and
Yeah.
they were dealing with mental health issues or whatever it might be. So I think a lot of employers need to be more empathetic towards those situations. And like you say, hire for not just the person that or the job that they've done, but what they're capable of doing. Right. And I think
Yeah.
anybody that's authentic, genuine, who has a purpose behind what they're doing. I mean, if they have those things, you can't coach on those things. You can't tell someone to be compassionate towards geriatric patients. You can't teach somebody that skill set,
Yeah.
but you can teach them all the other things. So as long as they have the innate, that's their personality, then fantastic.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. It's, you can't teach someone to care. You
No.
either have or you do. You either have or you don't. And so that's, I can teach you how to do how to serve correctly or how to do housekeeping or whatever. If you don't care, we're going to see something there.
And I'm just curious from your standpoint, because I think this is, and not everyone's this way, but it's kind of a stereotype that accountants are very like heads down, not people like
Yeah.
persons. So my dad was an accountant for a short while, but he was also a bartender and a DJ. And then he ended up teaching finance. And he found that as a good route because he's like, I just couldn't sit in a cubby for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and feel like I was doing anything good in the world. But I feel like from the conversations I've had with you, you're very personable. Was that a difficult transition for you to come out of kind of just the accounting role to then, oh, this is my circus and my monkeys type of thing?
Yeah. It really wasn't.
Okay.
Yeah, why I got into accounting is like, I had a guy in college said, hey, if you don't hate it, you should go for it. And I didn't hate it when I took a class just to improve business.
Advice I've ever.
It's not great advice, but I was 18 and I was like, hey, let's try it.
Yeah. Oh my, is
Um,
that a professor? I hope not.
no, it's not. No, it's not. But I love math. I like numbers, and if
Hmm.
I can't do it in my head, that's what they have calculators. But I saw I like puzzles innately, and so accounting's a little bit like a puzzle trying to figure out,
Yeah.
this works out. And maybe that's why I wasn't a good accountant because I looked at it that way. But, it was a lot easier for me just having played football and utilizing those qualities of the locker room and leadership, the good parts of it. That was really easy for me to kind of step into a career.
Yeah.
The hard part was just I'm innately a very positive person, and the environment pre COVID just was not.
Yeah. I think leadership is one of those things too, where I've had leaders who are super personable and bubbly, and they're not always the best leaders just because they are that way. Like sometimes it's the people that are a little bit more just not reserved, but they're quieter. So they pick up on cues because they're not talking.
Yeah.
Like, so they can feel the room more, you know what I mean? And I think it can go both ways, but in leadership for, position that you have, I would imagine there's constant moving pieces. There's also, from my experience in working in that industry, huge turnover rates, especially with positions like CNAs, for example.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how have you combated that in your position? Like, what has kind of been the strategy? Are you over hiring to then kind of factor in some turnover? Are you building, career paths for people so that they stay?
Yeah. So the first thing is make them feel comfortable with their schedule.
Mhm.
Um, I I encounter a lot of people who go into senior living and they coming from another place and I never knew what my schedule was. I didn't know
Yeah.
if I was working on Monday. I sometimes didn't know until the week before.
Hmm.
And so I try to have try and bake out with everyone here. Here's either a weekly schedule that's never going to change or a 2 week schedule that will rotate every 2 weeks.
Hmm.
And then the second part of that is build out that career map. Hey,
Yep.
what's really important to you? Whether it's someone who's coming in and saying, like, I'm just doing this until, like, because I'm quote unquote bored and I feel like I could care for people, let's do it. Or if it's someone who's like, I really want to become a nurse one day, let's get your CNA. Hey, you stay here for 90 days, I'll pay for your CNA. You go get your CNA. We'll work together to figure out the next step. If you just want to learn what, or hey, I want to be an executive director. Okay, we got a long way to go, but let's figure it out.
Yeah.
Right. And then kind of like following up on that. Right? I think follow up again is a large part of leadership. And I'm not saying I'm great at follow up. I'm generally pretty good, but there are lots of things that I miss, and that's why I have a team. But it's like that part. And then admitting and saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't follow up on this. What's next? What's the next steps? What can we do to get you moving in the right direction?" And 9 times out of 10, a lot of people go, "I'm comfortable where I'm at. I still have lots of things to learn," or "Yeah, I want to move," and or the other side of it is like, "Yeah, I'm ready to move forward." Rarely do they go, "Yeah, you were wrong. I don't want to do that." No, that happens, right? But
Yeah.
and that's okay. So.
Yeah. And I think sometimes too, like not only do people change their minds, like a lot of times I talk to people and I'll say, okay, so tell me about your turnover. Like, why is there turnover? And if somebody tells me it's because so-and-so is promoted, so now their position is open, that's a sign to me that this is a good practice, right? This is a good leader who has been able to build a strategic talent acquisition process, because that's how it should operate. Like in my mind, you should not have to hire outside high level positions. It should be all promoted from within. But what typically happens is that leaders have a really good person internally, or have somebody that's capable but maybe isn't in that position. They don't ask them what they want to do. They don't even know that that person could be in that role or wants to be in that role. So they don't provide them with the resources to become that person. And then that person ends up going and doing it somewhere else after you just paid for them to get trained on the other side of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if people would just adopt the process of like, who do I have right now in my company who maybe isn't clinically 100%, or maybe they're not like a shaped leader, but they have all the right things that that person needs to be successful in that. How can I help shape that? And then you backfill underneath. And then that way, not only are you saving from a perspective of you're going to have promotional growth within, which always attributes to positive culture, higher retention rates, but you're also building loyalty with somebody because you're patting them on the back and pushing them up, and not going outside and then telling this person, by the way, you have a new boss,
Yeah.
So I think that is what I've always preached to my clients is like, instead of focusing on the high level and backfilling, like who do you have in your current organization that could fulfill this position? And a lot of times it counts me out of making money. That's what I do. But then they trust me because I'm like, well, let's backfill that person's role and promote them with, up within.
Yeah. And on the flip side of that, like the person that you don't promote, go and tell them, hey, here's why we didn't promote you, and work on these 4 things, and you'll be there in no time. Like I think that's the other side that staff and like people want to hear is the honesty. The honesty. Yeah, we do a lot of like surveys, and communication is always one like how we can do that. But the other one is like I want honest feedback, not like hey I'm doing good, but like hey I'm messing up here. You can do better here. In that situation you had with someone.
Yeah.
Like a soft skill or that sort of thing that you can improve on. They want to hear that.
Yeah. I think too, there's a lot of like one way feedback that happens in organizations where it's just from the top down. And I think the most helpful feedback, especially when you're trying to get a temperature check on like what can we forecast for in terms of people leaving, is ask them like, hey, would you recommend a friend to come work here? And when they say no, you're like, oh crap, well, why? Like, don't just take that stat and not do anything about it, because that means they're on their way out the door. Like they've already got 1 foot out. And so to retain that person and also get the referral, like what can we do better? And I think so many people just see it as like, well, you're either, meeting expectations, you're underneath it, or you're exceeding it. We'll wait till next year to reevaluate. And that's their performance management system. And it's like, performance management doesn't have to be as complicated as people make it. It just has to be authentic, and it's a relationship, right? And like you said, it takes a lot of effort. The follow-up is the hardest part, because when you've got a million things going on and you're having to focus on something somebody told you 3 months ago and follow up and be like, where are we at with that goal of yours?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's difficult, but it sounds like you've been able to implement some really good strategies to try to not only find talent, but keep them with you.
Yeah. The other part too is I try to be a good person to them.
Mm-hmm.
Even I've had, and I feel like this is really telling for me, is even someone that I fired, or they said, or terminated, is they're like, well, thank you for everything you did. And I'm like, I just fired you, right? And they're like, no, I appreciate that. I kind of needed to do it, but like, you're a good person to me. And that's valuable to me, because senior living is so small that same person is probably going to come back. They're going to come back around, they're going to learn their lesson and come back and go,
right.
You're really helpful. Can we try this again? So
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing too, is that people change. And as a leader, I think it's also important to, like, when you're hiring and firing people, is I've had to learn that too, is somebody could be a really good person, or somebody could be a hard worker, but if they're not happy in the position, or if it's not yielding you like that person's success, right, then you're doing them a disservice by holding on to them just for the sake of a number or retention rate. And so I see a lot of this in medicine, where it's like people just hold out because they're like, well, I've got a contract with the hospital, or, oh, well, I've only been here for a year. And it's like, yeah, but someone been with you for a year, but they're not producing and they're miserable and it's bringing the culture down, then, it might actually cost you less to just replace that person, and that person go on and find what's a better fit for them.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good mix of both, and to have that discernment to know when it's the right time and when it's the right person or not. I think that's also something that just myself as a leader, I've had to get better at, because it's difficult, especially if there's like personal relationships there, or you have built a lot of trust up.
Yeah, that's I cannot understate enough. That was I think the hardest part, especially when you create relationships and like someone's quote unquote taking advantage of that, and you're trying to discern, can I fix it, or is it just time to, move in a different direction?
Yeah. And then it's like, I don't know if you're a people pleaser. I'm a people pleaser. So as a people leader, it's one of my greatest strengths and also one of my greatest flaws, because it's, I don't have a lot of enemies, but it makes it hard for me to like put my foot down when my foot needs to be put down on things. And I'm better about it for sure. But, I feel like in your position now, like for you, speaking of goals, like how do you envision your career, or do you feel like where you're at is, and I don't mean the company, I'm not trying to recruit you, I'm just saying, like, long term, how do you see your career growing within the space?
Yeah, I think about this often, because I've been at crossroads a lot between, senior living's hard. It's a 24/7 job. I'm getting married next year.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. And so today's actually 8 years that I've been with Phoenix, since I've been with PSL longer than I've been with my fiance. So she doesn't know any different, right? But I think a lot about, like, I don't necessarily want to be the 24/7 of it. However, I don't want to leave it.
Yeah.
So I think for me it is continuing in operations and leadership, maybe leveraging some accounting knowledge and acquisitions or something like that.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think that's something I always yearn for growth. I think that's kind of the age of where I'm at. But I'm having fun. I do love what I'm doing right now. It's a joy
It
to
is.
go to work. It's a joy to go to work every day, which I know a lot of people don't get to. So
No. Yeah. You know what? I own my own business, and sometimes I wake up and I'm like, damn, I hate my boss. Like, you are your own boss. I'm like, yeah, exactly.
yeah, yeah,
I'm like, she overworks me, man. But yeah, I mean, work is work. That's what I like to tell people is my parents used to say, if you think work is 100%, it's a vacation because no job is going to be perfect. And there's always going to be something that you kind of are like, I'm not crazy about that. But for the most part, like I know when we first talked, you said you get paid once and, financially, but then you also get paid in the impact and the mission and what you're doing. And I think that's an awesome way to kind of tie a bow on what healthcare is, and especially within senior living, what you do. I mean, there's so many people that choose to go and become leaders within these super complex specialties and high up surgical roles. And it's like, yeah, of course there's purpose there too, but there's also tons of space. As you said, people aren't knocking down the doors, but there's still a need, right? When
yeah,
you look at primary care, you look at family medicine, you look at senior living, all these specialties are lacking in care, but also increasing in demand.
yeah,
So it'll be super interesting to see the boomer population as they age and how that then plays out with talent acquisition, because it's hard now. 10 years from now, I don't know. I feel like it's going to
yeah,
be extremely difficult.
yeah. It'll be. I'm interested to see how it goes. I'm interested to see, obviously, the types of people
Mhm.
that get into senior living, and not just within the care side, but I mean, just like within, again, we have a full restaurant, full kitchen, right? So, like, my specific community, we have a full restaurant. The people that are flocking to us are like, they come from fine dining restaurants because they don't like the, you know, 10 a.m. to 2 a.m. time. They can come in at 9 and leave at 9 and be home with their kids and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's all interesting, like kind of going back and forth and really seeing there's positives in some places and negatives in others. So there's definitely a shortage in people who seem to care sometimes, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Well, this has been super cool for me to kind of hear the challenges, but also how you've developed a good strategy, it seems, from a cultural perspective to really just make people feel listened to and valued. And I think that will always win when it comes to retention and talent acquisition.
Yeah.
So kudos to you. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We'll have to have you back on in 10 years when we figure out what's going on with the boomers.
I love it. Let's do it. Let's book it.
Hopefully we're both not doing the same things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thanks everyone. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to the Healthy Careers Podcast, where we provide a platform for you to ask hard questions and get real answers. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and share it with your friends. Stay tuned for more episodes every other Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern.